At some point today, you thought about someone. Maybe for a second, maybe longer. Maybe you checked your phone hoping for a message that has not arrived yet. Maybe you replayed a conversation from 3 days ago, looking for something you missed. You did not decide to do any of this. It just happened. And the reason it happened is older than anything you would recognize as human. Love, or whatever it actually is, Ying, did not begin with flowers and candlelight. It did not begin with poetry or weddings or the feeling you get when someone's name appears on your screen. It began in the dirt, in the cold, in small groups of people who could not survive alone, doing something that looked nothing like what you have been told love is supposed to look like. But the real answer is far stranger. Because what your ancestors did when they fell for someone may be the single most important thing that ever happened to the human species, and almost none of it was romantic. Start with the biology. When you are attracted to someone, your brain releases a cascade of chemicals that researchers have spent decades trying to untangle. Dopamine floods the reward system, creating the craving and the obsession, the reason you check your phone. Norepinephrine spikes your heart rate and sharpens your focus, the reason that person seems to take up more mental space than everything else combined. And serotonin drops, measurably, significantly, in a pattern that the neuroscientist Donatella Maraziti at the University of Pisa documented in the 1990s, when she compared the serotonin levels of people who described themselves as newly in love with the serotonin levels of people diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder. The patterns were nearly identical. Your brain in love is chemically indistinguishable from a brain that cannot stop. But why? What was the evolutionary point of making falling in love feel like an obsession? The anthropologist Helen Fisher at Rutgers University has spent her career imaging the brains of people in love and people who have just been rejected, and what she found reframes everything. Love, she argues, is not an emotion, it is a drive. It sits in the same primitive neural architecture as hunger and thirst. It evolved not to make you happy, but to make you focus. In an environment where survival required cooperation, where raising a child to reproductive age required more than one person, where forming a stable bond with a specific individual dramatically increased the odds that your genes would continue, your brain needed a mechanism to make you choose someone and stay chosen. The obsession is that mechanism. The inability to think about anything else is not a side effect of love. It is the point. Now go back further. Not to ancient Greece or ancient Egypt, back to the Pleistocene, to the world your brain was actually built for. In small hunter-gatherer bands of 20 to 50 people, the question of who paired with whom was not private. It was political. It was survival. Anthropologists studying contemporary forager societies, the Hadza of Tanzania, the Kungsan of Southern Africa, the Agta of the Philippines, have found remarkably consistent patterns in how pair bonds form and are maintained. There is courtship display, which in humans looks like increased grooming, gift-giving of food or crafted objects, and sustained eye contact and physical proximity. There is mate guarding, the impulse to stay close to someone you want, to monitor who else is near them, to feel something sharp and hot when a rival appears. And there is what researchers call pair bond maintenance, the ongoing work of staying chosen, which in ancestral environments meant shared labor, shared food, shared risk. Your jealousy is not a character flaw. It is an ancient monitoring system that evolved because the cost of losing a bonded partner in a prehistoric environment was catastrophic, not just emotionally but reproductively, socially, and physically. The people who felt nothing when a rival approached their partner left fewer descendants than the people who felt everything. You are descended from the ones who felt everything. But what did early humans actually do? What did love look like before language could name it?
The evidence is fragmentary but extraordinary. At Songhir, a site in Russia dated to approximately 34,000 years ago, archaeologists discovered the burial of a man surrounded by thousands of hand-drilled mammoth ivory beads, each one requiring roughly 45 minutes to make. The total represented tens of thousands of hours of labor. Someone made those for him, or with him, or in mourning for him, and placed them in the ground. At sites across prehistoric Europe and the Levant, Researchers have found small carved figurines, some abstract, some startlingly detailed, that appear to represent human bodies, often with emphasis on fertility and physical form. Whether these were objects of desire, ritual, or something we have no category for remains debated, but they suggest that the symbolic representation of other human bodies, the projection of meaning onto a specific person's form, goes back at least as far as modern human cognition. The primatologist Robin Dunbar at Oxford University, who developed the social brain hypothesis, has proposed that language itself, the thing that makes you human, may have evolved in part as a replacement for the physical grooming that primates use to maintain social bonds. Grooming is time-limited. You can only groom one individual at a time. But language lets you maintain bonds with multiple people simultaneously, across distance, across time. Love letters, in other words, may be the evolutionary descendants of a chimpanzee picking parasites from another chimpanzee's fur. The technology changed. The function did not. And then there is attachment. The psychologist John Bowlby, building on decades of research, described what he called the attachment behavioral system, a set of evolved responses that activate when you are separated from a bonded individual. Protest, despair, detachment. These are not stages of grief invented by the modern mind. They are ancient, conserved responses visible across mammalian species, triggered by the loss of a primary bond. The pain of a breakup is real in the same way that physical pain is real, because it activates overlapping neural systems. Your brain does not distinguish between the two cleanly because, in the environment it was built for, losing your bonded partner was a threat to survival, and threats to survival hurt. What ancient humans did when they fell in love was this. They stayed. They built something together. Not a house, not a life plan, but a web of mutual dependency. Shared food, shared protection, shared labor over the long, slow, dangerous work of keeping another person alive. The anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hrdy at UC Davis has argued that human cooperative breeding, the involvement of fathers, grandmothers, siblings, and community members in raising children, was the evolutionary development that made everything else about humans possible. Large brains, extended childhoods, language, culture, all of it was scaffolded on the radical act of two people, and then a community of people, deciding that this child belonged to everyone. Love was not a feeling that happened to people. It was infrastructure. And yet, the feeling was real. Is real. The obsession, the focus, the way a specific face can reorganize your entire internal landscape, none of that was engineered from the outside. It grew from the inside, from hundreds of thousands of years of selection pressure that rewarded the ones who bonded deeply, who felt the loss sharply, who returned again and again to the same person in the cold and the dark and the long, uncertain stretch of a prehistoric night. The next time you check your phone for a message that has not arrived, the next time a name crosses your mind uninvited, the next time you feel something pull at you from across a room, that is not weakness. That is not distraction. That is the oldest technology your species ever built, doing exactly what it was designed to do. At some point today, you thought about someone. Now you know why.